want to begin by reminding you of a famous saying. It goes like this: please don't shoot the messenger just because you don't like the message. I am not responsible for the conditions that we face as a nation today, but I am not going to sugarcoat what the situation is. My guess is you already know it in your hearts and in the backs of your minds. What will the United States do? Continue its denial of what's going on? Threaten, as they have, China with war, despite the fact that China has nuclear weapons and the Russians do too, and they are now allied in good part because of the United States? Or are we going to sit down and work something out? Are we going to tell the American people, honestly, our empire is declining? The next one looks to be Chinese. Or if it isn't Chinese, it's going to be a multinational replacement for the kind of dominance that the Persians or the Dutch or the British or the Americans operated. The world is changing very fundamentally. Mr. Trump's economic proposals, whatever else you think of them, are economically incoherent. It's great advertising. I'm protecting you with my walls. It's wonderful. But when it comes now to governing, it's impossible, and it's a bad joke. And the whole world is watching. And while it's watching this bad joke unfold, the gap between the United States and the G7 on one hand, and the People's Republic of China and the BRICS on the other, deepens. The United States' effort to stop, block, undercut China have failed. Been doing it now for 15 years. Started big time under Obama. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And so the question is, what? Do you keep doing it? Mr. Trump won the election because he positioned himself with dramatic gestures, the sort favored by Madison Avenue advertisers. And the two gestures were, I am the great protector. Mr. Trump understood far better than the Democrats that people feel attacked, undermined, frightened, scared, worried for themselves and their children, as well they should be. They glimpse fearfully where things are going. They want to be protected from it all. So he put himself forward as the great protector. And his two images were walls, the image of a protector. He's going to put a steel wall at the southern border to protect us against the invasion of the immigrants. And then he's going to put another wall, a tariff wall, to protect us against the evil Chinese. Very powerful images, very successful. But in terms of economics, total incoherent nonsense. We have 10 to 12 million undocumented immigrants. That's according to the Department of Homeland Security. We are a population of 330 million Americans. Do the math. 10 to 12 of the poorest people in the country, those immigrants, are not the explanation for the economic difficulties of this rich country of 330 million people. The very idea of that is ridiculous. An undergraduate who wrote such a thing would be called in by their teacher and told, try to think through what you're saying before you say it. If Mr. Trump now deports 5 or 10 of these 10 to 12 million immigrants, which he has threatened to do, there will be consequences. Why? Because undocumented immigrants are the most abused of our working class. An undocumented immigrant who asks for his pay on Friday afternoon and is told by his employer, sorry, I don't have the money, has no recourse. He can't go to the police. He's an undocumented immigrant. He doesn't want to get anywhere near any office of the government. He will not complain. He can't. He's like a slave. And that's how they're treated. The construction industry in this country is a major employer. If it doesn't have undocumented employees, it'll have to pay Americans. And you know what? It'll have to pay them a hell of a lot more than they're paying the terrified undocumented immigrant. And that will mean the cost of construction will zoom up. And you know what that does? It worsens our inflation. Mr. Trump either can't do it for that reason, or he will produce an inflation that will overnight turn him from savior to demon in the eyes of his own followers. Then there's the second wall, the tariff wall. Let me remind everyone what a tariff is. It's just a tax. It's the name given to a particular kind of tax, namely the tax charged to an American importer when that person brings something produced overseas into the United States to be sold. It means Mr. Trump, a Republican who is against taxes, is proposing an enormous tax increase. And while saying he's hitting the Chinese with a tariff, it's not the Chinese who pay for tariffs. It's Americans. The American importer will pay much more, and that person will then charge more to the consumer, you and me. And you know what that means? An inflation, which he can't have. Yet he proposes these, counting on the American people to be into denial, not to interrogate any of this, to sit there and have debates as if there's something to debate. The debate is a distraction. It's a way of not dealing with your problem because you're too frightened of letting it be debated, lest it go where it might bite you. And we are run by a community of businessmen and women in charge of our corporations, including our mass media, who are not going to do it. And our job as Americans is to stop behaving childishly in this game of thinking that the problems I've barely sketched don't have to be worried about, because we can continue to act as if we were in charge in the way we were in the 1960s and 70s. We aren't. Nothing like that. The war in Ukraine is lost. For those of you who don't keep track, is over, except for signing the documents. Russia won, Ukraine and the West lost. The war in Gaza isolates the United States. Indeed, what historians will say when they look back on this time will be that the United States undertook to isolate and neutralize the dangers after World War II. First in the Soviet Union, then in China, then in the global socialist world, nowadays in what are euphemistically called authoritarian societies. But the end result of the plan to isolate the rest of the world going through these efforts was to isolate the United States itself. We and Israel are standing all alone in that part of the world. And the Europeans, whose world is collapsed, they're economically a basket case. And you know why? What the major reason is that Europe is gone as a player? Because they relied on two things: exporting to China, which the Chinese don't need, and cheap energy from Russia, which they have turned away from. So the energy costs make a European production uncompetitive. They have to pay too much for energy, and they can't sell in China the way they once did. They're done. Germany, which used to be the engine of European growth, is now the laggard dragging it down. It really is extraordinary, folks, that what you have thought about and assumed is now over. And it takes courage, but also a sense of realism to say, now we are going to talk honestly about our situation and try to find a livable way forward. The alternative, well, I don't want to spell it out. You can figure it out for yourself. But I hope you will not hold against me that I have told you how this situation really is, rather than comforting you with more denial. But if I have failed, which I understand I may well have, then I have good news for you. If you want to wallow in denial, just turn on the radio and the television, and this evening it will all go away as you get told that the great issues of our time are those carefully excluding everything I have told you. The United States is going to be in a very difficult position. It is going to discover that in the end, the only way they are going to ever get manufacturing back, to have anything like a diversified, balanced, or whatever you want to call it, economy, is if they make the wage level in the United States competitive with that where you are. And that means that they're going to have to come down on the American working class even more than they already have. And probably the way they're going to do that is by basically freezing wages as much as they can and increasing prices, having an inflation here to accomplish this job for them. And that is going to provoke, and that I can assure you, social trouble in the United States. You're seeing all the signs of it, whether it's in a renewed militancy of our labor movement, which is renewed in a way it hasn't been for half a century, and in the young people of the country who are facing situations no one prepared this generation for. There aren't jobs, there is no career advancement. Just to give you an example, most of my students used to become professors. Now, most of my students can't get jobs as professors and are doing something else. And the assault on the universities is part of that larger project of redesigning the United States so it can compete with the permanent objective, no burden on corporations and the rich. Or if any burden is on them, it is going to be much greater on the rest of the population. Those are the imperatives that govern the policy around here. And other than that, they don't have anything. I mean, think what it means to grab the Panama Canal or to grab Greenland. Those are acts of desperation. You know, taking land, there are no people, taking land where you don't even know what's there, taking control of a canal that you had perfect free access to anyway. This is almost like a caricature of colonialism, which I suspect is its desperate last breaths. And other than that, there is no program here. None. They're still stuck in the old laissez-faire notion, you know, the Anglo-American notion that whatever is private is somehow better than whatever is run by the state. And so they still have to do at least verbal, but also real policy accommodation of that idea. So that limits them in terms of what they can have the state do. Let's remember, in our country, the Republican Party, for a century, has had one basic appeal to the mass of people, and that is low taxes. We won't tax you, we'll cut taxes, we'll remove taxes, we're against taxes. That's their defining issue. Their leader now is imposing taxes and involving the government in intervention in the economy that makes a joke out of libertarian ideology. It's easy in this country to point to a big, loud libertarian who's actively intervening on every possible level in the economy to make it work. The transition to economic nationalism is real here, but the mentality of the people doing it hasn't adjusted yet. My guess is, I understand it's a guess, that across the global south, and for that matter, in Japan and in Europe as well, there is now a recognition slowly settling into the minds of the employer, the capitalist class, that all transactions with the United States have become more dangerous, less profitable, and more uncertain, and that they have to respond to that. Some of them hope that they can wait it out. Others will be acting right away. And the greater success of those acting right away will force the rest of them to do the same. And what will that be? It will be reorienting their economies towards the BRICS. That is, China, India, those are the new poles of the world economy. If you can't do business with the United States, given the problems of Europe, you are going to be looking for sure at the global south. Yes, it's poorer. Yes, I understand all that, but you don't have much choice anymore if you're going to salvage your situation in a time of disruption like this. So I think you're going to see, I think you are already seeing the desperate textile workers in Lesotho or the vanilla people in Madagascar and so on. They are going to have to look, even if in the best case scenario, the tariff were reduced or removed, they still just had the experience and they understand that it could be reinstated, it could be raised, and given the problems of the United States, that's the likely outcome. And so you better protect yourself. You've been warned, at the very least, by what you are now seeing. And that means also disengaging from the dollar to whatever extent you can, and looking elsewhere for the whole strategic growth. The financial sector has informed the government of the United States that this endless running of budgetary deficits, and for example, this year the projected deficit is $2 trillion in 1 year for the United States, and it has been running trillion-dollar deficits for several years now, on and off. It has been told you can't keep doing this because we are not willing to lend to you because you are approaching a time when, for example, the amount of your budget going for defense, and in our country we don't call it War Department, we call it Defense Department. There's a very important ideological move that we need to do. But the money in the budget going for defense, plus the money going to service the debt, is making it impossible to do much else in this society. And so, for example, you see that one of the initiatives of Mr. Trump, handled by Mr. Musk, is to savage the public employment at the federal level. All right? Now you can begin to see this is a step to show that the spending side of the budget is being reduced. And it's being reduced at the expense, brilliantly clear, which is the working class. It's working people being fired by the federal government, who then must find work in the private sector, which drives down the wages and working conditions there in the usual demand and supply, adding to the impact on wages that comes from bringing in the working class of the global south. So you have that on the one hand. Then on the other, the prohibition on taxing corporations and the rich, which neither the Republicans nor the Democratic Party dare to do in this society. So you can't raise the money there, and the spending cuts, however dramatic they make the news, are nowhere near big enough to begin to deal with this on a massive basis. So what is the government left to do? It has to reduce the deficit. It can do it partly by savaging the working class, but it can't add to the dismissal of the workers a big tax on the working class. It would produce, even in the United States, unsustainable trouble from below. So here comes Mr. Trump's innovation. He can tax, hopefully, you, the rest of the world. He can put a tariff on the whole world, hoping thereby somehow to raise the money. And how is it? Well, let's go through it. Number one, hopefully, exporters in the global south facing the tariff will lower their prices. They absolutely intend that will happen to some degree. And number two, the extra price will be passed to the American consumer because they will have to pay whatever is not reduced price of the exporter. And by calling it a tariff, half the American people still do not understand that a tariff is a tax. They actually believe, and Mr. Trump has repeatedly said that the tariff punishes the global south, making it more ideologically acceptable. And though it's not understood, but that's the plan. Inasmuch as there is any plan, the point of the tariffs is to, I'm exaggerating, but I want to drive the point home. The point of the tariffs is to be the other side of reduced government spending on programs and workers as a good faith sign to the financial class that the creditworthiness of the United States is being attended to by this government. And the beauty of it is the impact on the rich and the corporations is totally minimized. They are not taxed. They are not required. They are being pandered to by this adjustment that puts the burden of recalibrating at a time of declining empire, the government's budget, which is otherwise an early sign of just how many problems are accumulating. I think the tariffs are symbolic of what the United States is now prepared to do in a desperate effort to hold on to its position. That the very contradictions we point to in how you both undermine and yet reinforce the dollar abroad, that's a sign of a transition. It's like the wind letting us know that the climate, the heat is going to come or it's going to go. These are the signs that you're seeing. And in case people are not aware, this administration is also taking extraordinary steps to make the effort at moving manufacturing here more difficult. So be very careful. The language of Mr. Trump is about returning manufacturing, but that has been the language of the last 8 presidents of the United States, every one of which promised to do it, and not a single one of which achieved this promise. It was an empty promise. And I see Mr. Trump caught in a bind. To give you an example, he is spending huge amounts of money and thereby worsening his deficit on a program of deporting undocumented workers, mostly from Central America, but from other parts of the world as well. A very costly reduction in the most profitable workers, because undocumented workers are given the lowest paid jobs and are often swindled by their employers because they cannot risk going to the authorities since they don't have documentation. And if they complained about not being paid, they will be thrown out of the country. Okay, we're talking millions of people. You know what that does? That pushes wages up. It's very clear. And we've already had whole industries, for example, agriculture, example, meat processing, example, low-wage service workers in big institutions complaining bitterly, the employers, that they're losing their labor force and are being forced to pay much higher wages to native-born people whom they cannot exploit on the scale that they could the undocumented. This is not a good message to potential manufacturers elsewhere who don't want to spend the money to move their production, who don't want to reorganize their supply chains, who don't want to take the risk of doing all of that, when in fact tomorrow the tariff structure may change and all of that will have been wasted. And now on top of it, they're facing a likelihood of rising wages in the United States. And Lord knows how he's going to be dealing with that. So you have some indication the state of Florida has decided, in view of the absence of undocumented workers, they have decided to change the law to allow teenagers to be worked the way undocumented workers were. And that's a very important state for our agriculture. Child labor is returning. That's another sign of desperation. They don't know where or how to go. And my guess is the return of manufacturing is something you say, but it is a slow, difficult process. And the very uncertainty of the tariffs, on again, off again, up it, lower, and then constant comment by Mr. Trump that he's going to work it out with foreign leaders, with Xi Jinping or Mr. Modi or whoever. So we don't even know what the end result of the pattern of tariffs will be. These are all measures that preclude manufacturing from coming back. I don't think that's a serious objective anymore. I think they're desperately trying to manage their budget, and they're doing it at the expense, cheaply, of foreign workers whom they can eject with the least political opposition, and tariffing the whole world and hoping that that works and that it will at least give them a few more years in which to borrow less and thereby placate the financial sector. But it is desperation on a longer term decline. And it leaves me wondering, how will the employer class in Europe, or for that matter, in the global South, how are they going to reposition themselves in relationship to a declining empire desperately taking these disruptive steps? The only way to solve the problems of unemployment and poverty and all the other basic economic issues confronting the United States, which are now building to a crescendo as a desperate government. That's what Mr. Trump's regime represents. A desperate government reaches out and tries unorthodox things, tariffs, firing hundreds of thousands of public employees. These are extreme actions, and they reflect the extremity of the dangers and the crises that have accumulated. They are acts of desperation, however cleverly they are choreographed in front of your evening television news. That's what they are. They are attempts to reform. Mr. Trump's tariffs want to reform the entire global trading system. With Mr. Musk, he wants to reform the entire federal workforce, what it does, how it does it, who does it. These are dramatic reforms. But what you'll never hear from the Republican is one word about changing the capitalist system. And by that I mean, very simply, the arrangement in which in every factory, store, or office, a very small group of people, the board of directors if it's a corporation, the owner, the operator of the business, the partnership, if that's what it is. They make all the decisions. What to produce, how to produce, where to produce, and what to do with the profits. And of course, should surprise no one, they take care of themselves first. They're rich, you're not. They're powerful, you're not. They hire and fire, you don't. That's the difference. And the Republicans wouldn't say a word. But because of what happened after the Great Depression, the Democrats won't say a word about that either. During the last presidential election, neither Mr. Trump, nor Mr. Biden, nor Ms. Harris had one word to say about the employer-employee relationship and the imbalance of power and wealth inside every business that shows us. You want there not to be an abuse of the mass of working people, then you're going to have to face it. They're going to have to be in charge. If you don't want masters to abuse slaves, you've got to end slavery. If you don't want employers to abuse employees, you've got to end that relationship.